So today, we're going to give you a little rundown about how to create forms in SwiftUI, some of the basics. I know probably here everyone knows about SwiftUI. Raise your hands. Who here, yeah, most. Who here has worked with SwiftUI? Okay, so the basics are good. Yeah, and talk a little bit about the pros and cons. So, why forms, right? Here at Smart Labs, where Mathias and I work, we created the popular form builder, Eureka. And when SwiftUI came out, we decided to wanted to know like how SwiftUI holds up to this task. So starting with the basics, right? Create a project. What do we see? This is basic view. First things that come to mind, we got the import for SwiftUI, and what you got to know is basically that now everything is a struct, views as structs, and we put the components inside the body, right? How you can see the simple text. And also below that, you will see the content view previews. This pretty much works to allow us to do the new tool in IXO 11 for the previews. So to start, what we wanted to do is like first create a list, right? The list for what we can see is that it's super simple compared to what we usually do, right? The only thing we got to do is put the list inside the body and run through the users that we created before. This is very simple, like there's no magic to it. But what if we want to handle other kind of data? Let's say something that's not static. And as we know, we're working with structs, right? So to do this, what came out with Swift 5.1, I believe, is property wrappers, right? And what this does is it allows us to mutate the variables in order to change the views. So we got 3 of these, right? The state, which works with primitives such as int, strings, or whatever. And we got the observed object, which works with any kind of model that you want to do, like any kind of reference type model that you have in your app. That could be a user. And we got the environment object that works with, let's say, anything you will have application-wise, think any global variable. The thing is here is that all of these work with a two-way binding. So what is this two-way binding? Well, what this does is that if we change the variable, it will change the component. If we change the component, it will change the variable, right? What this allows us is to automatically refresh the view. So knowing about this, what we did next is add 3 new variables. One is a string for text, another one is a bool for the toggle, another one is a date, right? And we added these new components to the list, and we can see it's very simple. All we have to do is add the component, the old format, is the structure is all pretty and nice. And something that we have to notice here is, of course, when you add a component, we add the variable, and right beside it, we have this, I think it's a $sign. I don't know what you think it is. This $sign, which basically indicates that we're doing this two-way binding we talked about before. And again, if we do something in the component, it will change the variable, and if we change the variable code, it will change the component. So now, let's say, what I want to show you guys is how easy it is to change from a list to a form. The only thing we have to do is change the line where it says list to a form. So that's very simple. And also, what we want to show you guys is how it changes the formats of the components inside. The most noticeable is the date picker, which basically changes to a complete different thing. Yeah, just again to show how easy it is. But also, if you want to fool a little bit around, what we did is create a bit stack and put it inside the scroll view, like kind of imitate. But again, all the pretty stuff pretty much goes out the window. And we have, again, all these changes which are not as pretty as the other ones. Something that we did, we found some limitations. We work with this, and we're going to talk a little bit more. But there is a workaround to these limitations, mostly because these things are kind of new. But we have some interoperability between UIKit and SwiftUI. What that means is that we can get some, let's say, UIKit components and put them on SwiftUI or vice versa. For UIKit, what you have to do is confirm one of these protocols, or for SwiftUI, we just wrap them inside a UI hosting controller. So what we do here is just we had some issues before, and these things really helped us to work around them. And yeah, so now Mati is going to give us a little demo and with the things we showed before and how to move to a little more complex things and how to create a form with SwiftUI.
Okay. Hi. So yeah, the demo is going to start. We're going to build a very simple register form. We're going to start with this. What you see here is just text fields with, well, we have names, email, and passwords. And yeah, so let's look at the code here. So the first, yeah, so we have a form inside a vertical stack, right? And then we have sections with text fields. And we have a model up here on top. So let's have a look at the model. It's very simple in this case. It only has one variable for each of the fields, right? These are marked published, which makes, results that when these variables are changed, then the UI that depends on it will automatically be refreshed, and you will see the change in the UI. So let's go into this a bit deeper. We have text fields where you see that's just the title and the binding to these variables for each of them, a bit of styling, so for keyword type and so on, not much more. And a difference to the password fields is that you use secure field here instead of text field. But yeah, that makes it a secure text entry for what it would be in a UI kit. And then finally we have a submit button, which is a custom component which just adds a bit of styling to the button, like padding and title and so on, and it also adds like the background and so. And this submit button is enabled when the model is valid, right? So that will work when we compute that. So this is, and when the button is tapped, we'll see an alert. So we can run this to check what this is currently doing. I'm running on an iPhone 8. That's on purpose because it's smaller, and we'll have some issues with that. So yeah, you see that we have a very basic set of text fields here. And these are secure text fields, and that's it, right? So yeah, let's add a few things to this simple form. One thing we want to add to pretty much every form in apps is validation. So we want to validate each field and then show the user the validation error if there is some, and tell the user what's actually wrong, right? So we're going to add that. We also, in SwiftUI, the text field doesn't come with a clear button, which in UIKit comes pretty much out of the box. So we are going to implement that. You will see that's quite easy as well. And yeah, so the other thing, this is not showing the keyboard here, but when it shows the keyboard, then we are not seeing this final text field, right? There is no scrolling up or so we will look at that as well. So let's go back to the code. And one advantage of SwiftUI is that we can easily make components and compose them and use them everywhere. So that's something we will find helpful here. So for the text fields, right, we're going to add a bit of several things to each text field, and as it is going to be pretty similar, we're going to create a separate class so that we can do that only once and not have to repeat the code everywhere. So I've already done this. And here we start, we have this validated text field, it's a text field with validation, right? So we have a title, we have a binding value. So this means that whenever this value is changed in here, it will also be updated in the parent component, which is the form. So we can bind this value that we are using in the text field or so to our model. And the same happens to a validation result, which you can look here, is just an enum, could be valid or invalid with a message, right? So, and finally we have a secure, which just helps us to define if we're going to use a secure field or a text field. And that's it. So let's have a look at the body, like the content of the view. We have a VStack. We're going to use this later, and then inside is this branch. So if it's secure, we use a secure field. Otherwise, we use a text field. We use the title and the value, which is bound, and then we have an onEditing changed, which we are also going to use later, right? And yeah, finally, this is already part of very basic validation. So we add a background to this field, which is a color, which, yeah, if the field is valid, it's clear color, and otherwise we add a slight red color to the background, right? And this background, this is a list raw background. It will only be shown when this component is used in a list, and the form is kind of a list. So yeah, let's see also. I have a form. This form is pretty much the same as the previous one, just that we use this component here, yeah, and we bind in these values from our model. The model is a second version that we are look at it in a moment, but the form here is the same as it was before otherwise. So this, if we look here, the user data, here we have, apart from these variables for each of the fields, we have a validation result variable for each of them, so that when, for example, the first name is set, yeah, we update the validation result, we compute it, and then when the validation result is set, we validate, yeah, and well, this is done for all of these variables, more or less, different validations, and finally in validate, we just check that everything is valid and update the is valid variable so that the button of the form, the submit button, is enabled or not. And so let's check this. And you'll see this is very, very simple. And the first issue we see is that all the fields start invalid because they are empty and they are not valid. So that's not nice. We want to only show this error, validation error, once the user has edited the field. So that's something we can improve, right? So let's change this to support that. And what I'm going to add here is a state variable. State should be private, so we're going to define it as private. And yeah, this variable is going to tell us if the user has edited this field, right? So, and then in the background, we only want to show this background here when the user has touched it. So if he hasn't touched it, then we don't want to show any error, right? And then we also want to show an error message, right? We have this validation result, which returns invalid with a message. So let's show that to the user so that he knows what's wrong. And for the text field, we have this handy onEditing changed method here, which is called when the user starts editing the text field or stops editing the text field. So what we're going to do in this case is when the user leaves editing the text field, we just set this variable to true so that we know he has kind of touched this. And unfortunately, we do not have this onEditing change for the secure field. Otherwise, it has the same parameters, but it just doesn't have this, so we can't implement the validation like that. We can do something simpler, and for the demo, we're just going to add a tab gesture. So when the user taps the field, then we are going to set this touched variable here. So there we go. Now, we also have to show this message, and for that, the first thing is we're going to add a few helper variables. So let's add them here. These variables, what they do is the first one tells us if we should show the validation message, which basically checks the validation result, and then yeah, if it's invalid and has a message, then we show it. And then the second one returns the validation message. We need this because inside a view builder, like a body, you cannot use if case or if let. So we need this helper kind of to extract the value from the enum validation result we have here. And then we are going to use the vstack to show this validation error under the text field. So this is very simple as well. Just if we show a text with the validation message and set a font and the color to this text. So let's see this in the app. There we go. So now we immediately see that the fields are not invalid by default. We can tap here, we can delete all of this manually, and only when we leave the field, this pops up there. And yeah, so that's much better, and it will do for now. So let's also add a clear button so that the user can easily clear the text field by tapping that button. What we're going to do is add a horizontal stack here, so that to the side of this text field or secure field, we add this button, right? So what's the code here? Simply when the value is not empty, we add a button. So and this button will set the value to be at the empty string, and it consists of an image and is a plain button. So let's try this. So there we go. Now the clear button appears, and we can use that. So that's nice. So yeah, what's missing? Another thing that's missing is this final text field, which the user cannot see, and he cannot even scroll to it, right? Because the form has no padding at the bottom or so. So what would we do in UIKit to solve this? We would probably add something behind the keyword or so to push the view up, but we also would scroll to this text field that the user is editing and probably scroll it to the middle of the visible screen or so. We cannot do that in SwiftUI. There's no way to set the content offset in a form. So that's quite a limitation for this. And one thing we can do is here to add we can listen to the notifications when the keyword is shown, right? And so this is a helper class which will subscribe to the notifications of the keyword, right, when it's shown or not, and then it has this variable keyword height which will be updated to show the value, so it's either 0 or the height of the keyword. So we can use that too, and this is a kind of a basic solution. You can come up with more complex things here, but we can simply add a padding under the form so that the user can scroll it, and also you can see this text field, right? And the padding is the keyword height minus more or less the size of the submit button, which is at the bottom. So let's try this and see how it works. So keyword doesn't work. Now when we navigate to this one, we'll see that the user can scroll it and see it. So it's not an ideal solution, but we can do some things. And yeah, the problem is we cannot use the scroll to row or the functions of the scroll view, which we would use in UIKit. So there we have most of these features working. So and you see the validation is correct as well. So when we enter strong password, and the password is the same for both, the form will be valid, and finally we can click submit, and it will, well, in this case, just show whatever we entered, right? So this is what this is the demo we wanted to show you, and some basic things like how we can create a form and add some features to what is coming or what comes out of the box with SwiftUI. It's also quite simple. For example, if we want to add animation to all of these changes, that's very easy in SwiftUI, and we can check that here. So if we add an animation block at the bottom of this field here, and you can use any type of animation, but let's try with this. You'll see that all these changes that depend on the state and so on, they will all be animated, and you can obviously animate each of them separately, but just with one line like that, you will see that the changes like appearance of like the validation error here appearing, all of it is animated. So that is quite useful, and it's great, at least for the built-in animation. So yeah, let's go back to the slides and recap a bit. So we found that well, SwiftUI is like in its beginnings, and it has quite a few limitations, like we can't set the content offset of a form. We can't use all the delegate methods of a scroll wheel, which we would use in UIKit to create like more advanced things maybe there. There's also an issue which I didn't mention before, but that the text field, we cannot set it to be the first responder, so we cannot programmatically set a text field to be edited, right? So, and that stops us, for example, to let the user jump from one text field to the next by tapping the return button, or adding buttons to do this feature. We can't do that. What we can do, and we talked about it earlier, is use a UI text field, wrap it, and expose the first responder methods, and then use that in SwiftUI. So we can work around these limitations. Like some of them, for the content offset, it's not so easy, and the secret field, for example, has no on-editing changed. So in that case, we cannot implement the validation as we wanted and as we did with the text field. So there are many more, obviously, just to give like examples of this. And yeah, our conclusion after working a bit with forms and SwiftUI is, for doing simple things and what you will find in most blogs and so on the web, it's great, and you do that in, I don't know, maybe 20 lines of code and you have something. But if you go deeper, you will find many things that are missing, many holes. And yeah, some of them are easy to work around, others are very hard. So yeah, it's up to each one to say if you want to use this already or not. And yeah, another advantage is this, that in SwiftUI it's so easy to make different components and compose them and use them everywhere, and reuse the code. So that's nice. So yeah, thanks. And if you have any question, and we have time.
Yes, does anyone? So does anyone has a question? There we have one. No? Okay, another one. Don't be shy. There we have one. Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, will this demo be available after you talk?
We can make it available, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Hey guys, great demo. Thank you for that. And I wanted to ask you, how did you find the learning curve for SwiftUI, to do a real project as a, experienced developer and with many years in UI kit?
Yeah, so it definitely helps if you have worked on maybe React Native, other frameworks that have this very like stateful way of working, I think. And yeah, there are others as well that might help in this learning curve. Otherwise, I think I didn't find it too difficult. And as time goes by, you will have many blogs and so on that will introduce you and tutorials. I think with help of that, it is quite doable. It's not too hard, I think. If that answers.
Yeah. Anyone else? One more?
Okay, thanks a lot for the presentation. My question is, seeing these unperfect things that you have to implement to have the same functionality that we have in UI Kit, what do you think? Does it make sense to make all this custom code to have the same that we have already in UI Kit? Do you think it's a future?
You ask if there is a future in this, or what?
For you, does it make sense do all this code, custom code, to have the same functionality that we already have in UI Kit?
Yeah, so I think many things you will be able to do them with SwiftUI and much less code, right? So there will be many features that are simpler to do. And yeah, for now, you have many of these like holes which are not there, and it is definitely safer to wait a bit, and I think Apple will add many of these things that are not there yet, but they will add it in next releases. So I think it will make sense to use this.
Okay, thank you.